Hey, welcome back to Second Time Around. My name is James. Thank you for joining us today. On the bench today we have this beautiful vintage Oris. I picked this up for around £40 to £50, and as you can see it is in terrible condition. That's what we do, that's why we're here. But we're going to fix that today. We're going to get that back to its original state as best as we can. I'm glad you're here to join me for the journey. So I would estimate this watch is anywhere from the 1950s to the 70s. I would imagine 50s. You can see beautiful patina on the dial, but there is a lot of rust, which we will have to address at some point. Yeah, you can really see on the lugs there, which is an issue, but we will deal with that. I think first order of business really is to see if we can get that case back off. You can see the watch is running, which is a great sign. I wouldn't expect something like this to be running, which leads me to believe it's been serviced, which we'll see when we get into it. I would have ordinarily put this on the timographer, but it's going to need a service regardless, so I think we're going to just skip this stage.
Okay, so I actually changed my mind. I do want to see what this is running like, purely for for the video and to see how much we can improve it. I don't expect too well, so we'll see how we get on. And there we go, you can see it is horrendous, and this is what we call a snowstorm. There's not really any reading at all, so we will get that back.
So let's go ahead and get this watch open. I have already opened this off camera, so you don't have to see me tugging away at it constantly. But let's take a look at the movement and see what condition that's in. Like, hopefully no rust, and yes, wow, that looks pretty okay. Yeah, you can really see, again, the dial and the rust, but the movement looks okay. It looks like it's definitely in need of a service. You can see all the marks where this has been serviced previously. You've got the balance, the barrel bridge, and the centre wheel just there in the middle. A screw here does appear to be loose. Yeah, that's strange. I haven't really seen that before. One screw is loose. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me move it and quickly show you. You see that? That was loose, and that is without me touching it. This is quite indicative commonly of a watchmaker getting in here and trying to solve some stuff, but it gone wrong. So the first thing we're going to do here is remove the crown stem. This is the part that winds the watch, just so we can really get the movement out. And that come out easily without the setting lever being touched, which means that will have to be addressed as well. It's common to find a lot of problems with these watches. You know, they're so old and servicing has not been done for a while. You can see the rust on the stem just there. Okay, so let's start disassembly. I do believe this is a front loading watch, which means that the movement cannot be removed from the back. However, we will remove these case screws and then remove the movement from the dial side. So I actually picked this up from a woman named Elise, who lives not too far from me. And she said that she had this in her grandfather's storage container and an assortment of other watches. But this one caught my eye. And I think the dial and the watch itself, I don't know, I just think it looked like it needed some saving, and that's what we're going to try and do here today. This is a special tool I'm using here. It's a bezel removal tool, so we're going to attempt to remove the bezel in order to get the dial and movement isolated. However, it doesn't seem to want to bite at the moment. Is this going to work? Okay. I think we give it another go. It might not be biting down correctly around the bezel. This is quite a great tool. A lot of watchmakers use a case knife. However, this protrudes from all four angles, so it really does reduce the risk of damage. And there we go. We have got it off. You can see the crystal there. And we'll have a look at this under the microscope. And wow, okay, it's not in terrible condition. However, there are a few scratches, so we will be deciding whether to replace this or whether to give it a clean up. On these vintage watches, it's commonly a replacement. It just makes the dial pop more. and it's what the watch needs sometimes. Yeah, it looks like it might need replacing. But take a look at that dial. I mean, that is beautiful. We do have to be cautious with these hands though. In this era, it was very common for these hands to be made of radium as opposed to tritium, which they are made of now. And radium is radioactive, so we do need to be quite careful here. In small doses like this, it's generally harmless. As you can see with the loom in the middle, it's microscopic. It's a tiny amount. However, when ingested, it is radioactive, and therefore it could cause you issues. So we're going to get the hands off now. When removing hands like this that are this old, you really have to be careful. They're easily bent, and replacement parts for a watch this old, it's not ideal. They are available, some. However, we're going to try and avoid that. And the method to doing this is using this clear plastic film, as you can see, and just trying to get under there and pop them off like so. They seem to come off with ease, but you do really have to be cautious when doing this. There's a few types of tools you can use to remove hands. I like these ones that just gently lift up. But we do have what's known as a sub-seconds hand, and the sub-seconds hand is a lot smaller. We're going to put these hands just in this little protective tray for now. I like to keep these away, so they don't get damaged or harmed. And this sub-seconds hand that you can see at the bottom is a lot smaller. So we're going to be using a different tool to try and remove this. When most people see watches and get into watches, they want the newest shiny thing, and it's something like this they would just see as damaged. But what I see is that it's evidence that this watch has, it's lived a life, and we really don't know where it's been. It could have spent decades being worn, scratched, neglected, left in a drawer. And watches are a lot like people. Time leaves its mark on all of us. You can see that dial. I mean, it's a real collector's dial. It's faded and got what's called a patina. Oh wow, we had a eruption of different things there. Okay, so now on the dial side of the watch, you can see there, two things have jumped off. So one of those is going to be the setting lever screw that is here, which you can see. Originally, I thought that could be the yoke spring, the other thing that jumped off. However, I believe it's part of the setting lever screw that's broken off there. With watches like this, it's very common that parts break, especially when there's a lot of tension inside the watch, metal on metal parts, lack of lubrication, these things break, and it is very common. So that will need replacing, which fortunately I will order that and get it replaced. But for the dial at the moment, we're just going to store it in one of these dial containers. Wow, what a beautiful dial. This just keeps it safe away from dust and, protects it from any damage, because a dial is something you really can't risk damaging when it comes to watch restoration. Okay, so the movement now. Again, all looks absolutely fine. However, it's definitely in need of a service. We have no idea what the mainspring's like. But we will soon find out. You can see that the balance bridge, the mainspring barrel, the balance. So we're going to start disassembling this. I first got into this because I loved watches, especially mechanical pieces. How they run without a battery. I thought was fascinating. I've always loved taking things apart. Computers as a kid, I was constantly working out how they work. But instead of just collecting watches, I wanted to understand how they actually work. I work full time, but I wanted to learn a new skill. And you can see there that one of the train wheels bridge has come off. I believe that's going to be the third wheel. Especially with something like this, with all these parts flying everywhere, I thought this would be a straightforward service, but I believe this could turn into a much bigger learning experience than I expected. Oh, and then we have the balance. The balance is the heart of the watch. It's got those hairsprings around the collet that are very delicate. This is the pallet fork here that interacts with the escape wheel that then touches that balance and keeps it spinning. I always think it's crazy to think that tiny component, the balance, controls the entire rhythm of the watch. everything has to have a beat, and when it stops, it starts suffering. Like us, really. Lack of sleep, exercise, purpose, family, all that stuff. When it all falls out of beat, everything else starts suffering. Okay, so we've removed the pallet fork bridge now and all the other mechanical parts. Now you can see the pallet fork is just sat on top there of the movement. Now this is what we call a pin pallet. So it doesn't have what's called entry and exit stones, where they would usually interact with the escape wheel. It's quite common on these sort of movements. However, now they use a product called shellac that secures the entry and exit stones in place, so that they can interact with the escape wheel. Okay, fantastic. There's a screw there. I did not see that till now. We will be removing that as well in order to clean. I have noticed that one of the jewels on this is missing, so that will need to be addressed too. Okay, so over to the dial side now. You can see where the keyless works components are. That part has indeed snapped off. So we're just going to remove any dust on this. That will need replacing. The setting lever spring. I have removed the cannon pinion, which is the centre part that attaches to the second wheel. But we're now just going to get rid of the keyless works. All this stuff really does have to be disassembled prior to cleaning. There's parts that you just won't be able to get into at all unless it's fully disassembled. So that wheel there, you can see that's a minute wheel. So that interacts with the seconds wheel and causes the entire watch to turn. Those jewels you can see, the red jewels, they suspend lubricant in the air, suspend oil that slowly seeps down into the components of the watch to keep it running well. Those jewels on the scale of hardness are just 1 under diamond, so they're friction fit jewels, but they are extremely tough and durable. This keyless works part has to have a lot of lubrication. It's a lot of metal on metal when you're pulling up the crown stem, and without lubrication, the crown can come out, parts can grind away, erosion, rust, all this stuff can really start to affect it. Despite this channel being called second time around, I actually own a business. Timepiece Detailing is the name. UK based business. We polish, service, completely restore vintage watches, luxury watches, keep them running all round recently. We have an app you can download, Timepiece Detailing, a website and Instagram. So if you want to check out any of that, please, they'll both be linked below, and you are welcome to join. You can sign up for free and get notifications about any ongoing projects or upcoming things. These watches that we're working on will also be sold in our shop there, so you're more than welcome to buy them and have this video with them to show friends and family. It's really a cool thing to have alongside your watch as a collector. Collectors love patina. Patina is the yellowing of the dial that we saw before, and it sort of just shows the watch's story, the fact that it's been used, and the imperfections that have developed over time that make that watch unique. Life gives people patina too, like the things you go through, the things you deal with. Things like me getting this click spring off, which is not funny enough moving. I cannot seem to get this off. These springs are under tension, under a lot of tension. So if you're not careful when removing these, they will fly across the room. I've had these fly for ages, and then I've had to spend the next half an hour with a torch and a magnet trying to pick them up. But there we go, we got it off in the end. That's the click spring removed. You can see here we've also got that is the click spring that just come out there. And then we've got the motion wheel. This is the wheel that helps you wind the watch. It sits in the gap where the stem does. So here we're going to remove this. This is an intermediate wheel. This sits on top of that, and just basically allows all the gears to move. Technically it's part of the motion works. And then this minute wheel here we will also be removing as also part of the motion works. I did forget to mention, this is a manual wind watch, not an automatic. There's different types of watches you can get. This is manual wind, so what that means is it does have to be wound every day, which I understand can sound annoying. as opposed to the automatic version. The automatic is when it has that winding rotor on the top that constantly spins and keeps the watch running. But this is period correct, and this is what it is. Okay, so moving on, this is the Mainspring barrel that is effectively the powerhouse of the watch. It has a spring inside, a coil that helps run it. So we're going to see what that's like inside. I would suspect extremely damaged. I understand it's running, which is a great sign, but these are delicate and often break. So we will see if we can replace this or wind it up ourselves. You can see the little lip it has on the side to help you get under there. And once again, very careful not to let it fly across the room, and it doesn't look too bad. Wow, I am pleasantly surprised. I'm going to remove the barrel arbor, which is a part that I'm removing now. You can see sits in the middle. That looks in good shape too. Okay, so the coil in the middle is known as the mainspring. It is held under tension, so it's pressed fit in there, and it has to be released very carefully by holding each side of the mainspring barrel to gently let it out. If you're not careful, it will just fly across the room. They are very tightly wound, so as you can see here, I take out one side at a time, alternating my fingers to ensure that it does not fly at me. I've had these fly across the room many a time, and it is not a fun experience and can cause them to break. This one does seem rather tight though. They're usually more releasing than this. They tend to fly out quicker, which this can be a sign this may need replacing. However, I'm not seeing any signs of damage just yet, so we'll keep on going with this. Back in the era of these watches, the mainsprings were made from a material which isn't as robust as the ones that are made today. Here you can see all the parts are disassembled and laid out, ready for cleaning. Cleaning is a mix of different chemicals. Some people have cleaning machines. I prefer to do it by hand. I just can't guarantee that a machine is going to be able to do this as well as I can by taking my time and going through it all. You really want to brush off all the dirt that's built up over the years and go from there. I mean, this mainspring is very tightly wound, so that may cause us an issue. But I'm going to go through the parts off camera and clean them all and make sure that this is running as it should be again. Any dirt or grime can really affect the running of the watch. Okay, so since there's no obvious breaks on this mainspring, I'm going to attempt to wind it back into the barrel and obviously lubricate it, of course. People can do this by hand. It's very, very difficult. I don't know anyone that can. I often use what's known as a mainspring winder. It's a special tool that makes this process a lot easier and is also extremely satisfying to use. So yeah, here you can see the barrel lid, the barrel arbor, and then we've got the mainspring, the core you can see there. And that fits inside that thing, very like an intestine, a large part fits inside that small part. It's quite miraculous, really. Okay, so moving on, we're going to attempt to wind this mainspring back into the barrel. I'm not holding out a lot of hope for this, due to the age and the condition of the mainspring. Nevertheless, we move on. Okay, so it is winding in, which seems positive. But my main concern is that it's going to break as we try and place it back in. Okay, so we're going to see if we can get this last part in with our tweezers here, which can be a tad tricky to do. Oh no! Okay, that does happen at times. Okay. Yeah, as you can see, that mainspring was very damaged, but fortunately I have managed to obtain a replacement for this exact model. This is the Calibre 451 movement from Oris. Oris are a pretty big brand now. They they have a lot of watches. Some of them are extremely expensive, but they're a very well-known Swiss brand. Okay, so we're going to be using this replacement mainspring. Now these are actually easier to fit than the ones from the mainspring winders because they sort of had this red cap around them, as you can see there, and that's simply just pressed over the barrel using a tool like this one, just to gently seat it in like so. You have to be careful again not to seat this in badly because it will fly out and I will feel the effects of it and instantly regret it. I would absolutely encourage anyone to get into this hobby. It's a fantastic thing to do. The tools aren't cheap or sort of easy to obtain, but you can do this with a lot less tools and consistent time. It can be a lot to deal with, but a lot of it, if you put in the bench work, you can surpass and learn a lot about different watches. There are many variations of movements and parts, and you get chronographs and different parts. However, they basically have the same set of rules. You've got a train of wheels, mainspring barrel, a balance, an escapement, and the motion works and keyless works. So as long as you wrap your head around that, you can sort of work on anything.
Okay, so we're now going to lubricate the mainspring into the barrel and get this back into the movement. So I've worked shift work for a long time. However, I've recently ran into trouble at work, in terms of regular workplace issues and stuff. And that's really what got me into this. I genuinely believe it's never too late to start again. You know, I mean, even if you are 48, you know, you're in the second quarter. You're still in the first half. You know, you got time. People reinvent themselves, change careers, do multiple other things, create things at different stages in life. And I've never liked the idea that we're pressurised, or you know, there's a supposed to in relation to life and when you should do things. You know, I think you should take risks to a degree, reasonable risks, not unreasonable, but ones that you'll never regret. You know, if you wake up tomorrow and you're 88, you don't want to regret a thing. You know, and that's why I think you should do everything you want to do while you can. So anything like this, I would genuinely really encourage people to pick up and try, because something like this is just, it's a way of reinventing yourself. It's a new thing to do. For some people that's cars and sports and whatever it may be, but I do believe you genuinely should do it. Okay, so now we've lubricated the barrel, we're just going to put the lid back on. I have a special tool just to put this lid back on. You can just friction press it with your fingers, or with, well, not necessarily with your fingers, but with a tool. However, I use this tool, and there we go, it's sealed. So it's time to put that back into the movement. Okay, so there was a jewel that had popped out of this that I'd noticed, and these are friction press jewels. So I'm just going to pop that back in and friction press it off camera. Okay, moving on to the train of wheels now. So we have here the third wheel. We're just going to add a bit of lubricant onto that. There we go. This needs this because, you know, obviously metal on metal, and the rotations it makes in the watch really do matter. Okay, here we've got the centre wheel, and we really want to be applying just a tiny bit to, there we go, that will do. And there we go, that is the train of wheels completely set up. I do want to mention that there is parts to this that I do off camera, not because I don't want you guys to see it, however, it's time consuming, or, you know, and I want you guys to see the most interesting stuff about this, to understand the basics of all of it and how it works, as opposed to the sort of ludicrous parts that happen off camera, or the boring parts. So as you can see, we tested the pallet fork there just to make sure it was going back and forth, and it is working perfectly. So we're just going to place the bridges back on now and go, oh, if this screw will go in, which I believe it will. That screw earlier that was loosened, obviously that's fixed and tightened now, so we are back to where we want to be. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the dial side of the watch. This is where the keyless works and motion works are located. This is where most the movement happens. So we're going to use this blue grease here to effectively lubricate the movements. So as you can see here, we're going to place this on, and then this part specifically goes into the winding mechanism. This is the part that you feel when you rotate the watch and it goes part. You'll see it move at some point. As you can see here, we're going to put a bit of this in between the gap. The keyless works for me is oh, there we go, back on. Is the most tiresome part to a degree, purely because a lot of it is sort of tension fitted. So you have what's known as the yoke spring, and the yoke, well, the setting lever spring presses against the yoke and against the setting lever. So there's a lot at play here. Again, I'm trying to describe it in layman's terms as opposed to going through all the names and all the different aspects of it, just so you guys can sort of get a rough idea. It's very easy to put too much lubrication on these parts, and it's really easy to clean up. You use what's known as Rodico. You'll see me use it throughout this video. It's this sort of blue putty, if I could describe it in that sort of way. And it's amazing. Rodico is my best friend. I use it for everything. I use it for cleaning parts, as well as solutions. I use it for picking up parts that are tiny, that are, for some reason my tweezers just won't grip onto, and for cleaning lubrication and oil off of these movements when I have applied too much, which is very easily done. Okay, so just for reference, I haven't put the setting lever in yet, but I want to show you this is the setting lever spring. So you see this arch coming off it. This presses down and touches against the setting lever to keep tension on it in place. So when you pull it out and rotate it, it pushes against that part, like so. You see how that's moving? And that enables you to change from, time to date and other aspects of different watches, although there isn't a date function on this watch. There's also another thing called a hack. A hack is a different part of a watch, and it effectively prevents the time continuing to rotate, the hands continuing to rotate while you are setting the time. This does not have a hack, but once again, it's a good thing to know. Okay, so this is the click and the click spring that we're just placing in. This obviously this deals with when the mainspring and the ratchet wheel wind. It's quite uncommon to see a click and a click spring on the dial side of a watch. This was commonly done years ago. And it's rare sort of to see nowadays. Okay, so now the keyless works, so I'm moving on to the motion works. This part is known as the cannon pinion. It connects to the center wheel and is pushed down like so. We're just going to put some of that 8217 on there. It needs it when it's rotating against other parts. One thing I do want to say about Oris is that I do find it fascinating. The technology in terms of the watches that they were using for these years ago was quite outdated for the time. There was a lot of other stuff sort of coming out. Obviously, this was prior to the quartz crisis, when Japan took over the entire world in terms of making battery-powered watches. But this sort of stuff is quite outdated even for the time this was produced. Okay, so we're just going to put a bit of Loctite. This substance got in a Loctite. It effectively keeps the stem in place, helps to secure it, and it's just good and healthy for the watch to have. Okay, and now we should be able to rotate. You should see the winding pinion rotate and the intermediate wheels. There we go. You see them moving? Fantastic. That is good to see. It means we are doing something right. Okay, so now to put the balance back into the movement. This shouldn't run automatically. I've put no wind into the ratchet wheel, into the mainspring, and due to this being a manual wound watch, it's not just going to kick up and start like an automatic wheel. But this is, again, like I said before, this is the heart of the watch. This is what makes it run. There's a little jewel underneath the balance called an impulse jewel, which interacts with the pallet fork, as we said before, and that just knocks it left and right and basically arrests the pallet fork as it moves via the escape wheel. Okay, so we're just going to put some of this high viscosity oil into these jewels. These jewels are extremely hard on the scale of thickness and hardness. They're one below diamond. They're a very hard material, but they need this lubrication to function. This is some Mobius 9010 oil that I'm using. It's a well-renowned oil and it works perfectly. Okay, so now we're just going to remove the shock protection. In this system, it's this one, and that's to obtain the cap jewel, and that's going to move liquid down. Oh, we've got a screw stuck there. Let me quickly just remove that. There we go. Now we can use some of that Rodico to get the cap out. There it is. Let's have a look. Wow, that is dirty. Okay, like again, we're going to use Rodico to give it a clean up and also put it in a solution called One Dip, which effectively cleans it and we'll make it look brand new. And let's see how that happens. There we go, it's clean. And now we're just going to put some of that lubrication on there, which is going to seep down into the balance via the jewel. And now we'll just pop that back on with the Rodico, like so. If we can get it in there. This is a very delicate process. Oh, missed. Okay, let's see if we can just adjust that back on top of the jewel. A lot of different variations of watches have a different shock protection system. Some don't have any. However, most of them nowadays definitely do. And they are secured with something like this. There's different types, Inca block and many other shock protection systems, but they all do the same thing. Okay, so moving on to the case, you can see the rust there and how horrendous that is. So we're going to use a solution called Evaporust to get rid of that orange hue colour all over the lugs and the rest of the watch. And there we go. That is done. Again, you can see minor orange parts, but these parts are scratches inherited by the rust and are sort of impossible to remove. But again, I'm not going to polish this watch. A vintage watch, in my opinion, shouldn't be polished. The scars are the history. And therefore it wouldn't be right to do so, and I'm sure a lot of collectors would agree with me. Okay, so that dial now, I mean, how beautiful is that? It's a stunning dial. It's a beautiful patina. We're going to use that to put it back onto the dial side of the watch, as you can see. So most of the watches I put on here and are going to do these videos about will be for sale. However, this one in particular, someone has already contacted me about, and they weren't a fan of the hands. These are the original hands that were on the movement we originally moved from. However, they preferred a different set of hands, which fortunately I was able to source and place on the movement. So you will see those coming up shortly. However, I am going to friction press this, if I can show you, like so, and keep the hands on the movement. Okay, so here's the crystal. I did polish this crystal. I wanted to keep everything original if I could. If it's that bad, I will replace it. However, I use a substance called Flitz, and it's fantastic. It cleans it right up and makes it look fantastic and new again. Okay, so here are the white hands we said about, and I do think that looks a million times better than what was before. And that is it in its case. I mean, wow, what a watch. What a piece of history. You know, it's very rare to come across something like this completely restored. Okay, so now I'm going to put it under black light, and you can really see that lume. That is the radium shining through. And yeah, I mean, wow, those hands are impressive. Even the numerals have it too, which is fantastic to see. Unfortunately, nowadays it's quite common for a lot of places to refuse to service this. Some people go around the entire UK and would never get a watch like this serviced. People just refuse. They don't know how. It's too complex, and unless you're paying a silly amount, it's not worth their time as far as they're concerned. But this has sentiment, and I think that deserves something. I think this looks great on a leather strap. I did source period correct straps for this exact watch, which is this sort of stainless steel. It's an extendable bracelet, which was very common back in that sort of era of watches, and it is stunning. Okay, and after some regulating, -4 seconds a day, 242 amplitude and 0.2 milliseconds beat error. Wow, what a stunning result. I'm over the moon with that. I hope you are too. Thank you so much for joining me today, and please keep an eye out for more videos in the future, and thank you for help giving this watch a second time around. Goodbye, take care.